Hello, and welcome to my show, Searching for Integrity. My name really is John Smith, and I'm searching for people with integrity. Why? Because our country suffers from IDD, integrity deficit disorder. Today we have Ptolemy Pruden, author, naval person to the bone. He's got a lot of that. I'll tell you. We're going to all about it. That's what we're going to find out today. And let me start out, Ptolemy. You've got the book. It's in the makings. It's going to be said a few weeks.
Yes, I do. Thank you, John. I appreciate you inviting me to your program today.
Sure.
So yes, the book is named China Rising: The Case for Containment. Actually, I have a copy right here. You can get a copy called the ChinaRisingBook.com, the ChinaRisingBook.com. And it took me 6 years to write it. And so it's 400 pages and 50 pages of citations.
Only six.
Yeah,
When I did my memoir, it took me 30 years.
okay, so you got me there.
Well, let me ask you some questions. Things here, I would assume that you had an ear to the TV and radio the last week or so with Chi coming in to see, uh, I don't know what to call him, Biden.
Yeah.
You know what? So, what did you think about all that? Have you heard any information come out of that?
Yes, I mean, so I've been an avid watcher primarily of China's military. I think that they spend close to about $600 billion a year on their defense establishment. And for the Chinese, they include their Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines, but also their Coast Guard and internal security. So they have a whole lot more involved in their budget for their national defense. So you have to look at all the pieces when you look at China, but they have had a very high youth unemployment rate for the last 3 to 4 years, ever since after the pandemic concluded. And so their economy is tanking. Everyone is decoupling, which I'm a proponent of decoupling from China. And so they are in a situation where they need to get finances coming back into the country. And so everything has been micromanaged by Xi Jinping. And so now he wants to come back in and get more money to compensate for how he's been operating the country for the last 5 to 10 years.
Sounds to me he wants his money back that he paid under the covers.
Well, okay, so let's look at that. So that was good. So I think you're looking at the trade debt. You're looking at unfair business practices. You're looking at them raiding corporations there, U.S. corporations there in China. You're looking at how they have pegged the yuan to the dollar. You look at all these different things that the PRC has done in intellectual property. And so you're looking at a situation where they have to be turned back from what they're doing, not and strengthened and encouraged to do more of it. And so I am not a proponent in any capacity of helping the economy to grow any more than maybe 2.5 to 3%. I think so they can stay valuable as a fiscal entity, yes, but I don't want them to go into depression. But we don't need China having so much power that they're able to build their military to a point where it comes and causes a problem for us 5 years and 10 years down the road. And so it's economic warfare takes decades. And so we have invested 12 to 20 trillion dollars in the Chinese economy and through the last 3 decades. And so now we're in a situation where we just got to tune it down so that they can survive, but not thrive to the level they're building their military up to be a threat to us.
Right. What's the name of the woman who runs the Treasury?
Yellen, Janet Yellen.
What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think Janet Yellen. I mean, okay. So first of all, John, I'm an independent. So I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent, kind of trying to keep it down the middle of the road for very major and obvious reasons, because I feel that I have a lot to do nationally and globally, and I think I can do more being independent than anything else. But Janet Yellen, I think, has had a tough job trying to keep things moving and kind of pushing our country so that we don't go into economic stagnation as it relates to our deficit with trade debt with China, and actually in the last three months, the trade debt has been a plus, meaning we spent more with Mexico than we did with China. So I think that's a great thing. I'd rather increase the capability of Mexico and Canada than China any day of the week, because they're not trying to blow us up or trying to maneuver on us politically or geopolitically. So Janet Yellen is kind of maneuvering through all that. And I mean, look, when you look at the trillions of dollars we spent in growing our inflation rate and all the money that we're losing there, so there's a big job that she has. So, you know, I mean, you got to look at it from different. I look at her job from a global perspective as it relates to America's strength and what we have to do geopolitically, and making sure that we're able to keep our friends and allies strengthened. So I'm not looking at just from a domestic political perspective, but global operations perspective.
Well, you've got a very good view of that, I would say, adding to it. But then doing or being what you do, that probably fits right in the mill.
Yes. Okay. So for me, I want everyday Americans to be able to be a part of that national conversation. I want everyday Americans to be a part of the national defense conversation. So our NDA, the National Defense Authorization Act, is about $880 billion per annum. And that's going to grow up. And in a couple of years, it'll be $1 trillion per year. So our GDP overall is close to $30 trillion. So what's going to happen is the everyday American needs to understand how that money is being spent, and to make sure that we're not wasting money. I want us to invest more into our national defense infrastructure and the capabilities, but I don't want us just to waste money. That's when those days are over. You look at the last decade and a half, the Navy wasted about $100 billion on failed projects, whether it's a littoral combat ship, whether it's the Zumwalt cruiser, or whether it's extra $4, $5, $6 billion on the Ford carrier, which is a beautiful carrier. I've been on it. It's a beautiful carrier, but just how things are managed, but they've just wasted a lot of money. I'm not in favor of that. I'd rather build more weapon systems and better ships, but I don't want to waste the money. You see what I'm saying? So that's kind of so for me, you need money to do all that. And with our podcast called the Common Sense Defense Podcast, with the Common Sense Defense Podcast, our goal has been to have a campaign called Build Our Navy. And that's where we want people to call Congress to put $15 billion more into the shipbuilding fund. And so we've been dealing with that over the last year as well. And I'll be doing that to next year as well.
Great. I was listening to some debate. I call it a debate on TV.
Uh-huh.
And what they were debating on was the southern border.
Okay.
Of the U.S. And they had a number on the number of people that were actually Chinese men, military type men, and it was pretty scary. I shook my head. I think they said 57,000 of Chinese had gotten through.
Okay,
how did we fix that?
Okay, so for me, and I'm not being xenophobic, my biggest concern is not the Chinese men coming in from the border illegally from Mexico. It's more the people who are in our labs and the students that we train, 280,000, 235,000 students, Chinese students that we train every year in advanced physics and advanced technology that go back to China and strengthen their military industrial complex for weapon systems coming back to our children 4 years from now, 10 years from now. So, as long as those people coming across the border, it's all bad. But if they're not coming in to with weapons, physical weapons, then that's one component. But the other is the intellectual weapon, John, that we have to look at where that weakness is in our research and development system. So whether it is through the colleges, whether it's through the different types of research capabilities we have in advanced companies, technologies that are being traded, that are being stolen and sent back, all of those things I'm looking at. And to me, we have a big gaping hole that we need to make sure we cover that up. And I think to a certain extent over the last, I think some of the Trump era things, some of the things even Biden has done over the last few months have started sealing that wall off, because we are starting to realize, man, so much information has gone back to China. So much important intellectual capital has been stolen or has been taken to China. And so therefore we have a situation that we got to make sure that that's stopped. And so I think that's the conversation that's going to take us at least 3 or 4 years to start kind of working, especially since we're dealing with AI, quantum computing, all these things that have a direct military capability that we need to be cognizant of. So yes, we need to stop them coming in across the border, but we've got problems right in our universities, in our labs, in our advanced companies that information is being shipped right out the door.
Right. No bueno. They were talking too about the drugs, the fentanyl. Yes. Yeah, how does that fit in besides killing our peoples?
Okay, John, this is a dear thing to me, because you're looking at 75 to 80,000 people in our country are dying every year through drug overdose, and it's through fentanyl, and the precursors to the fentanyl are made there in China, and they're shipped here. But John, let me tell you this, and this is, no one's thinking about this, but 300 years ago, during the Opium War, we shipped stuff to China to destroy and make that country just stop. So to me, and for a decade, they were out of capability. The people were doing just like we're doing now. They were dying and incapable of operating and working. So I think that China is allowing this to come our way to get us back. And no one is talking about this, but the reality is, I think they're trying to get us back for what happened 200 years ago. And so I think that they're not making it a top priority. Look, 100. Can you imagine? You have created the ability for 75,000 American people to die, and not just. I mean, and the youngest people, the people who have the greatest capability for their future, dying at 15, 25, 30, 35, 40, younger, dying. And so, and not being penalized from a military perspective at all. Now, I'm not saying that we should go to war over it. I'm saying that it needs to be addressed. And I'm also saying that I feel that they are not addressing it because they're looking back through the Opium War the Second Opium War, and where we, along with Britain and a couple other countries, worked to keep China suppressed through drug trade.
Right. I think when they concentrate on doing that, they're of course they're building the number of Democrats and versus Republicans. So it does get political as to how many people come in the back door. You know, it's hard to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think the natural immigration process should be adhered to. I think that the policies have to be adjusted some across the board, or for reasons I don't want to go into here. But I mean, I think that people come into our country for opportunity. I think they typically don't come to the country to destroy the country or disassemble the country. I think there are bad actors that do come in. I feel that we have to understand that, but I also feel that one of the things that we should do as a nation is really to help Mexico and help Latin America, where they have more opportunity there. And if we are made it possible for Mexico and Latin America to have more opportunity, then people have be less likely to want to come here into our country. So there's another conversation. But that's kind of where my policy perspective is, that yes, we do need to build a wall. I think everybody wants to build a wall. But we also have to look at the root cause of what we're dealing with. And the root cause is they don't have an opportunity in Mexico and in Latin America, in Guatemala, Costa Rica, there's no opportunity. So right. How do we fix that? And look, John, we caused a whole lot of problems back in the 60s and 70s in Latin America with the School of the Americans and all those days. And we caused a lot of problems. And no one wants to touch fixing South America, fixing Latin America. No one wants to bother that. But we got to find some way that we can make more opportunity there in Latin America so that they can have a successful future and want to stay there in their own home country.
Well, I would think so. I know there's a lot of debate going on with that, but they're all wringing their hands. I would say they should. The other people that are in Congress, they're the people who will ultimately get into action, and hopefully we'll get it done. We just don't know yet. It's what do you think?
We got it. So we have to. Okay, so we have to grow our economy. So we're at $28 trillion, $29 trillion, depending on how this growth. We're at 4% growth over the last quarter, 4.25%, whatever. And so we're looking good as far as our growth. But you look at Canada, their GDP is of $2.25 trillion, and Mexico's $1.7 trillion. Both Canada and Mexico, their GDPs need to grow. And here's why I say that. We have to start looking at economic growth and development, not just from the United States perspective, but from a North American perspective. And we're not going to go to war with Canada. We're not going to go to war with Mexico. These are family and friends. how do we get them where they're more realistic and reliable and stronger trading partners? And so whether it's friendshoring, nearshoring, it doesn't matter to me. Pulling the money from China and putting it in Mexico, I'm totally cool with that. Putting more money into Canada if we can, I'm cool with that. So I think our goal should be, how do we grow the Mexican economy to a $2 trillion, $2.5 trillion? How do we grow the Canadian economy? How do we, and not losing it from ourselves, but how do we grow their economy? And I think foreign direct investment is the way to do it, and moving some of our production from China to Mexico that we can, or obviously, as you know, we're moving it to India and Malaysia and the Philippines. But I think that as well. But we got to look at how we can strengthen our North American continent economically.
Right. Now you follow the Navy
Yeah.
quite a bit.
Yes.
Is that where you floated for a while?
So okay, so yes, so yes, you're right. So the Navy is my the military is my strength, and the focal point is Navy. So so for 30 years I studied foreign affairs and weapon systems, and so I'm outside the Beltway guy, and I think that is a strength of why I'm capable of doing, and everyone's interested in what I'm talking about, is because I'm from outside the Beltway and not been part of the CIA for 30 years, or the DoD or anything like that.
Right.
Everything I've learned has been self-taught. And the reason it's important to everyone else is because everyone else in America can do the exact same thing, to be up to speed so that they can have their part to play in the national defense for our country and have a voice there. And I think that's kind of the strength of what I'm doing, is like, hey, if I can do it, somebody else can do the exact same thing. So now the Navy needs a lot of capability. They need a lot more money, and we have to make it possible for one to modify the processes in place so that they can get better in the maintenance for their ships, our ships, so we can get better in building ships more effectively. And so, how do you do that so that you can build the Navy and grow the Navy? So we only have 4 major public shipyards, and we only have 3 or 4 or 5 Navy primary builders. For this, General Dynamics, Electric Boat, Huntington Ingalls, Stahl, so there's only a few major builders. And so we have to increase the capacity for our Navy so that we can build more platforms. And the very first thing before we do any of that, we need to stop decommissioning ships, John. We decommission like 10 to 12 ships every year. We only have 290 ships. We are decommissioning ships. It takes 5 years from first cutting your steel to rolling out a new ship. It takes 5 years to get one out and back on the ocean. So when you're cutting back all your ships, you're going to have a problem. And so 2027, we're projected to have 285 ships. China's projected to have 400 ships. So we have a very big problem with that. And so how do you fix it? So the whole concept is, we need to first stop decommissioning ships. 2, we need to pour about $5 to $6 billion per year into the maintenance of the ships that we have, so they don't sit in port for 4 years before you even get to the dry dock. And then after we are able to get the maintenance up and going correctly, then obviously we're going to expand the capacity for our shipbuilding, for our surface ships, and definitely for our submarine industrial base. They need billions of dollars, from AUKUS to our own platforms that we need to grow. That we have a lot of capability there if we spend the money on it.
What's your view on training and coming in and putting on a uniform?
Okay, so training for the Navy, training for the military, training for the industrial base, training for what type of training are we talking about?
Let's see. When I came back from Nam, I ended up with I was a teacher because I was a drill sergeant, and I was the honor graduate of my drill sergeant school. And those kind of things are small, but they start, and they're smart. But people aren't enthusiastic about, because one of the enrollments, volunteers, is not what it ought to be.
Yes. Okay. Got you. Yes. So I think that, so we have a problem endemically across our nation. One of that is getting younger people to want to work. So that's the first thing, is getting them to work. And that the Navy has the exact same problem as the Air Force and Marines, Space Force probably too. Everyone has a problem getting kids to get into the job of the military or to work with their profession.
Right.
So we're going to have to incentivize them. I mean, we're going to have to make it where of that pool of young people that come in every year, and I think almost everybody's down 3 or 4%. We've got to get that pool where our numbers up. Now, John, a couple of things are going to happen. First of all, automation is going to reduce the workload, and also robotics are going to, but that's not going to be for another 10 to 12 years, 15 years, where those things probably come in and you start seeing a difference. And I think the Army and the Marines will see that difference before the Navy. Well, no, that's not true. The Army and the Marines will see that first, then you'll see it in the Navy, and you'll see it in the Air Force. Unmanned platforms, drones, and so
Right.
I'm a proponent of man in the loop, meaning I don't feel that we should at all have an armed unmanned vehicle in the South China Sea or in the Eastern, in the Philippine Sea, anywhere near China. Unmanned should never be there. An unmanned armed platform should not be there. It should always be manned, because if you have a human being, we know what we're doing. It's on us if we make a mistake. If a whale hits it, or if it hits the side of something and starts shooting, then you have a war that is started by our machine. So the point is that we have to get our forces equipped to do the job, and so we need to give them more incentive to come and join the Navy or the Air Force and the military overall. So we need to incentivize them. So which means they have extra, take the signing bonuses up, get them a car, different things we have to do, and we don't have to do it for maybe 4 or 5 years. After about 4 or 5 years, we're not going to have to worry about it, because those numbers are going to start coming down, because those platforms are going to be reduced with automation. That's like everything else. Automation is going to be taking over the military as well.
Right. I wonder though, to what extent those people that are in charge of that really work at it. Really have no reason not to see it, but it's just sometimes I just wonder.
Yeah, I wonder too. I think they're depending on automation too much. Personally, me personally, I like having human beings in the mix. Now, when it comes down to war, my policy is to replace the machines with men, replace the men with machines. So that they can do the next phase of fighting. The first phase of fighting is human to human, meaning, okay, we know for sure that you're fighting. There is no mistake. There's no error. Now that we know we have a real war here, replace those people with unmanned aircraft, unmanned surface vehicles, and unmanned drones, and all the missiles and torpedoes and all the weapon systems that you can find to get the enemy contained. And then after that juncture, then your follow-on forces will obviously be manned and unmanned hybrids. And the reason for that is because if you can get an adversary understanding, man, we're going to get our butts beat here, let's stop fighting. So if you can get to that phase faster, then you reduce the length of your conflict. And that's really conflict in the future, with particularly high-end conflict with like China, United States. That level of conflict is going to be quick. It won't be a 3-week or 3-month war, because there's too much involved and no one wants to go nuclear. So the reality is that conflict is going to be solved in the first 3 to 5 days. It will be over with.
Well, that's good news. My best friend is who is overweight. I hope he's listening. He was Navy.
Okay.
And his time was spent on a carrier.
Okay.
And apparently he was in certain parts of the water close enough to Vietnam about filing for Agent Orange. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. So they're still working on that.
For the filing for Agent Orange, I mean, every war has its horrors, and every war has its contaminants. And if the Vietnam contaminant with Agent Orange, the Gulf War was the Gulf War syndrome, where with all the oil burning contaminated the guys' suits and uniforms, causing them to be sick and die when they came back. Then you have the open burn pits that we deal with Afghanistan. You have the different other types of ailments and issues that the gentlemen, men and women, have gone through. And so everyone, there's always some type of dearth that they're dealing with. And now we have an incredibly high suicide rate. I think to the tune of 2 to 4 people are dying by suicide every day. That is that's terrible. Especially, it's like a war that doesn't stop. And it's the saddest thing. And I think that issue it should be a national issue that we do, because these ladies and gentlemen have served for their country. They have fought for our country. They have put their lives on the line, and they're not getting the care or not going to the care that they need. So the question is why, and what can we do to get them the care they need so they can keep living? They're young. They got a long life to live. Let's make it possible for them to live a long life.
Right. You know, I grade the VA and I give them an A plus.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is really awesome, especially over the last, as we've gone through the different challenges the VA has had to go through. And so the correction. So what you're saying to me is your experience has been, you've experienced a corrective measure where things have gotten somewhat better.
Yeah, they want to be. Somebody's managing it now. That makes sense.
That's good.
One was in San Antonio. Audie Murphy is there, and then here in Tucson, Arizona. They've been retrained, I think. And I've watched it happen, and it's good.
That's beautiful. That really makes me feel good. I mean, I think that anyone who puts a uniform on and makes an oath to protect our nation, there's somebody that the nation should always protect and look after. It's just the reality, and it's not about whether you're in for 6 years or 30 years, or it is about the fact that you served and that you put yourself in a situation where you to serve our nation. You should always be taken care of. It's just the reality of it. Absolutely the reality of it.
Ptolemy, we're so glad you had took the time to spread all that knowledge on us. I'm at home doing this. So good.
You're too kind, John.
It's good because our listeners need to hear some things like you have, and of course I do as well. That's why we call it Searching for Integrity.
That's a beautiful title. Love it.
And I thank you very much for being our guest today. And so long, and happy trails to all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And remember the ChinaRisingBook.com. And I'll look forward to talking to you and getting some more information to you, John, for when we do the book release.
Great. I appreciate that.